I'll leave everybody where they are, but I usually let people come in a little closer, but we'll be comfortable and have a conversation today and get things started. It's Mercy Hour. This is supposed to be the quietest time on campus, right? And it's a busy day. And I will tell you this, my name is Cass Williams, and I serve as the Associate Vice President for Mission Integration and Institutional Diversity. And I'm informal but formal. I can be both ways. It's okay. But I would say this, you ever go to a program and the program is longer than the keynote? This is not one of those moments, okay? I'm going to get out of your way because I know you all didn't come here to see me, even though I would like you to. But we will go ahead and get started. As I always do, I like to do a quick land acknowledgement. I think it's important for us to understand and to honor the original caretakers of this land. Because you see, before this was Misericordia University, this was home to our Native Indigenous people. And but not for their forced sacrifices, none of us would be here. And for that, I'm so humbled. Also, to give acknowledgement to Catherine McCullough and the Sisters of Mercy for really living and leading the life of mercy, service, justice, and hospitality. And in that spirit, I welcome all of you to Misericordia University. To our students, thank you for being here. To our visitors, the admissions office is right around the corner. Please feel free to fill out an application. I'm always recruiting, just to let you know that. I want to say thank you to Aaliyah. I know she's somewhere running around for coordinating a wonderful week of activities for us this week. Last night, we showed the movie Till, and we enjoyed MLK's favorite meal. And I'm gonna just say this like they say on Instagram, we had a time last night. I'll stop with that. Y'all were there, y'all know. Thank you to the Willery Foundation for their generous gift to make sure that we had this event happen, and we appreciate those efforts. Thank you to VP Lahart for ensuring, leading, and understanding that DEI is deeply embedded in our institution. And I'm sure she's going to be embarrassed that I even call her VP and all this, but I will embarrass her even more because for us, especially on the other side of the house, she is the heartbeat for us. So thank you so much for what you do. Thank you to President Myers for not only supporting the week, but being a progressive leader, visionary, and always keeping the students in the center of what it is that we do. And yes, I follow you on TikTok. To Dr. Shabazz, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Thank you for correcting history. And thank you for living out the legacy of both your parents. And I say both, and she'll speak to that, but thank you for living out both your parents' legacy. We appreciate you. And all of us collectively, before you even say a word, we want to say thank you. And now I'm going to shut up because you can't see me anyway. And I'm going to bring on one of our amazing students that is always in our office, and I think also the heartbeat of our office, Miss Amira, who will come in and do the introduction, and then we will have our keynote speaker. Amira?
Good afternoon, everybody. How are we doing today? Let me try that again. Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing today? Woo! Today is a great day. Thank you, Ms. Cass. Thank you, Aaliyah, for this opportunity. And thank you, Dr. Shabazz. It is definitely an honor to be here today. And with that being said, I'll go ahead and get started, all right? Ilyasah Shabazz is an award-winning author, educator, and producer. She has authored 5 historical novels and has served as project advisor for the PBS award-winning film, Prince Among Slaves documentary. She is the chairperson of the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Memorial and Educational Center. In her work to preserve the legacy of her parents, she has dedicated herself to institution building and intergenerational leadership development with the tenets of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Shabazz has furthered her community impact with the City University of New York's Office of Academic Affairs, where she created curriculum to encourage higher education for underserved inner city high school dropouts. She has worked with the Office of the Mayor in Mount Vernon as Director of Public Affairs and Special Events. She founded and produced a young adult development program. The purpose of the program was to provide insight on social justice, encouraging personal empowerment. As president and founder of the Ilyasah Shabazz Enterprises, she produces a variety of forums dedicated to power, possibility, and sovereignty. Dr. Shabazz is a member of the SOAR Higher Cabinet Committee for New Paltz College, a member of the Advisory Council for the Equal Rights Amendment Coalition, a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, whoop, whoop, and she serves as a trustee for the Harlem Symphony Orchestra. Dr. Shabazz holds a Master of Science in Education and Human Resource Development from Fordham University and a Bachelor of Science in Biology from New Paltz College. Currently, she is an adjunct professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City, where she teaches perspectives on justice in the Africana world. Grounded in the commitments of her parents, Dr. Shabazz emphasizes empowerment and inclusion in her teaching and scholarship. And with great honor, I would like to welcome Dr. Shabazz.
Wow, it's so full in here. It's so great to be in this lovely state of Pennsylvania. It was very close, well, 3 hours and a little bit, but it was close enough to come and be comfortable. So I am absolutely honored to be here. If I can just open up my screen. Misericordia University. Good morning, good afternoon. It's such an honor to be here with you this afternoon as one of 6 daughters of Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz, and I always share that I have 5 sisters. My father was 6'5", my mother was about 5'9", and the daughters that they had were very tall, very opinionated, and of course he thought that I was the only daughter, I'd never hear the end of it. So I have 5 sisters. To Kaz Williams, the Office for Mission Integration and Institutional Diversity, thank you for inviting me. And to everyone who planned this annual celebration, thank you for your legacy, your work and dedication, making it possible for all of us to gather and fellowship this afternoon so that we may leave here more enlightened, inspired, and motivated. And thank you for inviting me to be this year's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Week plenary speaker to discuss the legacy of Malcolm X, Dr. Betty Shabazz, as we look to the past to gauge direction to a collective future. In the 1950s, it was Dr. Carter G. Woodson, historian and educator, founder of Black History Month, who said, "The biggest race is to see who will control the minds of young people." And so I say to all the critical thinkers, the responsible thinkers who've gathered here this morning, our young people need you to recognize the power that they possess. We must continue to mentor as many young people as we can. We are responsible for ensuring they know, as my father said, that stumbling is not falling. We are responsible for helping them to avoid the pitfalls of individualism, materialism, and consumerism, pitfalls that are targeted at them daily. Can you all see me? Okay. We must teach our young people to embrace the values of literature, education, and responsibility. And we must instill in this young generation the importance of providing the same mentorship they are receiving for the next generation coming behind them. That the seniors must mentor the freshmen and let it be a cyclical occasion so that we ensure that this legacy of service is enriched and continues. A culture of excellence demands effort, sustained effort. We create a culture of excellence when we strive to do more than simply make a name for ourselves, when we aspire to leave a legacy for others. Thank you for your commitment to creating cultures of excellence. There's a saying in DEI, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. But here at Misericordia, you work to create a bigger table for everyone to join. And so, Misericordia University, we thank you and we applaud your work. First and foremost, I'd like to give praise to the Almighty. And on this occasion, as we discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would also like to give praise to our ancestors, all of them, the refined, industrious men and women who have not been properly honored in history, those whose stories have been improperly documented, those to whom we trace our heritage and our identity, those from whom we learn purpose. We give praise to the countless men and women who birthed humanity, who birthed thriving civilizations on the continent of Africa, including those who migrated across the earth, birthing new civilizations, those descendants who endured physical and psychological trauma, who endured the largest forced migration of a people in the history of humankind. However, today we still stand and we prosper. We are strong, we are vigilant, and we are interconnected as a human family. On February 21st, 1965, my mother, sisters, and I witnessed the assassination of her husband, our young father, Malcolm X. He was 39 years old. My pregnant mother placed her entire body over my three sisters and me to protect us from gunfire and to make sure we would not see the terror before our eyes. 1 week prior, a firebomb was thrown in the nursery where we babies slept in our home, where my father and mother slept as husband and wife. Despite witnessing her husband's assassination, Betty never gave in to bitterness or despair, even though she had every right as a young wife and mother. She kept her husband's essence, his love, values, and integrity integral in our household. She didn't want her 6 daughters to suffer from the sudden loss of our father's physical presence and his love. And though he was physically absent, this young mother made certain her husband remained present in our household conversations for as long as I can remember. My youngest sisters, the twins, weren't born. But if you ask them questions about daddy, they can rattle off a whole conversation. But I don't even know if they realize that they never laid eyes on him. But it is because my mother made sure we knew who our father was. I knew my father loved me. I remember his great sense of humor, his beautiful smile. I knew that he loved jazz music, literature, poetry, and that he studied history, nature, the arts. I believed he was a wise man with impeccable integrity, and I knew he was led by his service to God. And this was my foundation from where my values began to sprout. It was only in college that I began to hear inaccurate portrayals of my father's character and his life's work. I now understand why my mother protected us from the negative and false depictions of the icon, Malcolm X. so that his legacy and work could be accurately realized for the benefit of your generation. My father burst onto the civil rights scene as a young man in his 20s, not much older than many of the students here. The climate in America was antithetical to the humanity of Black Americans who lived in constant terror, traumatized, destitute, and without protection or hope in their own country. Separate and unequal were the law of the land. The rights of Black Americans were denied under color of law. In humble submission to God and marginalized people the world over, a young Malcolm X stood up and stepped forward. When we allow others to control our narrative, what we hear is that you can go to prison and illiterate, and miraculously walk out as Malcolm X, an icon. But such a narrative diminishes the importance of family. It diminishes the importance of one's foundation, of his or her or its morals, values, mentors. It invalidates the village needed to raise a child, and it diminishes the importance of critical thinkers and the role of responsibility. In his early 20s, Malcolm was a star debater on the Colony Prisons team. They debated Ivy League schools, Boston University, Harvard, MIT, and won. Malcolm studied the dictionary not because he couldn't read or write, but because he was fascinated by etymology. He worked hard to become his best self, and that is exactly what he became. At the height of the pandemic, while working on my latest book, which I've seen around here, The Awakening of Malcolm X, I'd have research sessions with two gentlemen. One is directing a film with 50 Cent about the Colony prison, and the other is a biographer in Japan who's working on a book titled Malcolm Before the X. The biographer in Japan described to me how Malcolm's debates as an inmate would echo on radio stations all across Boston, that people were captivated by his broad topics and specifically on capital punishment. Sadly, most of Malcolm's files disappeared. However, the biographer found a poem that young Malcolm wrote in the 1940s to his Pakistani minister, who was also a musician. The poem is about hope and promise. And I quote, "That Black musician, he picks up his horn and starts blowing sounds he's never thought of before. He improvises, he creates it. It comes from within. It's his soul. It's that soul music. It's the only area on the American scene where the Black man has been free to create, and he's mastered it. He's shown that he can come up with something no one has ever created before. Likewise, he can do the same given intellectual independence. He can come up with a new philosophy. He can invent a new society. He can create a social system that is different from anything that exists or has ever existed." And this was when Malcolm was 20. And so you see, when his favorite teacher, Mr. Ostrowski, asked this young visionary, this impressionable boy, what he wanted to be when he grew up, because look, young Malcolm was already president and top student of his all-white class in 1930s middle America. Malcolm replied that he wanted to be a lawyer, not a firefighter, a doctor, or a musician, but a lawyer. It's what he saw in his father, who helped underserved, marginalized people. But his teacher told young Malcolm in no uncertain terms that being a lawyer is not a realistic goal for the N-word. When young people are at a crossroads, they need educators who are willing to guide, nurture, and protect their way back, right? When we tell students what they can't do, we create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Biographers are beginning to recognize how Malcolm's advocacy work had been nurtured by his parents, Reverend Earl and Louise Little. They were members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, which commanded millions of followers worldwide in the 1920s, and it was like 45, 50 years after Emancipation Proclamation. As a respected and stand-up family in their community, they belonged to an organization responsible for providing racial pride and uplift, economic self-sufficiency, and nation building during the height of Jim Crow America. Malcolm's father was an organizer. He was president of the Industrial League. He was chapter president of the Garvey movement, and he was a member of the Parent-Teacher Association. But we don't hear these things. Malcolm's father was also a landowner, having purchased premium lands that was reserved for whites only. If you saw the movie, you saw their house was being burned down and they were always forced out. He was told he could purchase the land, but he could not live on the land. Do you think he lived on the land, or do you think he purchased it and allowed someone else to live in it? As a result, the first house in which he and his family lived was burned to the ground. Yet still, Reverend Earl Little was a man of faith, principle, and determination. He owned farmland, a fancy car, and he was self-sufficient. He was a human rights advocate who was targeted and lynched by the KKK in 1931. Malcolm's mother was an educated woman and the recording secretary for this organization. And I say this because usually two activist parents make sure they instill particular values in their children. Several books about her work have been recently published. Years after her husband's murder, she was without protection, much like her children. Local authorities swooped in and committed her to an institution against her will, as they did many women during this time, Black and white. Eventually, Malcolm and his siblings were separated, and the premium family farmland purchased by their father, which was reserved for whites only, was seized. But before they passed away, Earl and Louise instilled in their son and his siblings that the values of faith, education, and responsibility. Malcolm's parents were models of selflessness and sacrifice as they deferred personal freedom for the betterment of society. Two people who exemplify such virtues are Malcolm X and Dr. King. These two men thought of each other as brothers, yet in popular culture, they've been portrayed as polar opposites, even as enemies. People often come and whisper to me that they were on the side of Malcolm X or that they were on the side of Dr. King. But ladies and gentlemen, we do not have to choose sides. Both men shared the same goal of challenging an already unjust world. They were sharing the same goal. So what? They had philosophical differences. My father's point of view was human rights, and Dr. King's point of view was civil rights. And we need both to accomplish our collective goals. Back in my day, we were made to believe we had to choose. Are you for Tupac or Biggie? Are you for Malcolm or Martin? Why can't we simply embrace each of these men for his craftsmanship? Why can't we appreciate both for their undying love and commitment for their people? I've seen the beauty of community. I've witnessed sisterhood firsthand. After Dr. King and my father were assassinated, my mother and Aunt Coretta Scott King, people were often surprised to find her at our home or to know that we called her Auntie Coretta. But they both became best of friends, despite what has been portrayed as divisiveness. The two eldest daughters, Ilyasah Shabazz and Yolanda King, were founders of an actors touring company together, and Dr. Bernice King and I are sister friends as well. The Shabazz Center was inspired by the King Center. So you see, we are not rivals, we are sisters, and we are all a human family. We can choose to either fight each other or fight for each other. Because when we fight for each other, our possibilities are limitless. Now, I was told to speak for an hour, but I will spare you. We will go for about 35, 40 minutes max. Okay, I think I'm just going to divide this. But no one will end these unlawful acts that are waged against some of us, but all of us. And this means joining or creating organizations, clubs, group sessions, circle of sisters and brothers, challenging systems that maintain disproportionate incarceration rates for young Black men, systems that create racial disparities and child poverty. We must devise solutions and propose legislation that combats these injustices, but we can only do so when we are informed and when we are united together. Black power is not exclusionary. It does not elevate one group over the other. It simply recognizes crimes committed against humanity. It recognizes the discrepancy in history and the restoration of our membership in the human family. Take, for example, the film that was released in theaters around the world just a few months ago featuring Viola Davis, The Woman King. Anyone here see it? Okay. This movie is inspired by the true story of the Dahomey female warriors who resisted European colonizers. This David versus Goliath story is set in present-day Benin, 1823, West Africa. The director of the film, Gina Bicewood, said the biggest eye-opener was how much false information there is about these women and this culture because so much of history was written from the colonizers' point of view. She says that it was really challenging to separate the disparaging and disrespectful information, which was so far from the truth. But you see, stories from these historical perspectives must be included in our education curriculum so that every single child has the opportunity to be their whole and beautiful self. That's great. Thank you. Ultimately, while we must wrestle with the grief of this social and political climate, we must also hold on to the joy that comes from generative possibility. We as a nation are more than equipped to create radical spaces rooted in collective flourishing, where we are all thriving to be our best selves. It was the Nobel Prize winner, Rosalind Yalow, who said, new truths become evident when new tools become available. Progress in quantum computing, remember I was a biology major, so I'm always with the sciences. Progress in quantum computing would never have been achieved had we been forced to rely on high school microscopes. And similarly, Thomas Kuhn wrote about the process of discovering new truths and creating new paradigms in his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. He said that young people are the first to see when the paradigms of a previous way of thinking no longer applies to the world of today. When those rules no longer define the game we can play, we must conceive another set of rules with which to replace them, young people. And I want us to just sit with that for a moment, but don't fall asleep. When the rules of yesterday no longer apply to the world of today, we must create, another set of rules to replace them. My father spent much of his life fighting a system of Jim Crow, searching for solutions to the human predicament in a nation that blindsides us with divide and conquer tactics. Young people must continue to insist that America live up to her promise of liberty and justice for all. In the 1950s, when young people were seeking civil rights, my father came along and said, "We demand our human rights as your brother." There was no asking. He said, "We demand our human rights as ordained by God." He introduced a human rights agenda to the civil rights movement. In less than 12 years, he showed the world how it had been miseducated about Africa as the first world nation. He internationalized the struggle for Blacks worldwide. That wherever Black, Indigenous people of color lived, he observed they experienced the disregard of humanity and history. He reimagined the political landscape nationally and internationally for the benefit of the human family. As inequality still stands in the way of progress, Dr. King's words still ring true. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But let us not forget Malcolm's addendum. The arc of the moral universe won't bend on its own. It requires individual and collective effort. We must work together, walk together, and stand together. And we must continuously seek to support one another and push to find our way forward together to address the wounds of bigotry and corruption in our communities. My father said, if you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, there's no progress. The knife is still in my back. If you pull it all the way out, that's not progress. There's an open wound. Progress is healing the wound that the blow made. Now, these past few years have made us aware of our collective wounds, but we must do more to ensure we are no longer victims of sexism, xenophobia, or racial profiling. We must do more to critique, dismantle, and reform the unjust separate sets of rules under which our country has operated. America's truth and its history must be taught to our students in every school, at every level. It's an opportunity to eliminate bigotry, peer pressure, and gun violence by instilling the values of honesty, compassion, and forgiveness. Textbooks must teach every child that Black history is American history, and that American history also includes Latin American history, Native American history, and Asian American history. There's no American history unless each and every voice is heard on the pages of those textbooks. And this is the beauty of our country, ladies and gentlemen. This is the beauty of our United States of America. To have representatives of every nation living right here together. It is, I mean, what a beauty, how fortunate we are. And I'm reading through this really quickly because I just want to make sure that I follow the time. And I want to make sure you follow the words. But did you hear about the school district in Missouri that voted to ban Toni Morrison's first novel, The Bluest Eye? Oh, good. One of the members who cast her vote to ban the book said, by all means, buy the book for your child, but I would not want this book in our school for anyone else to see. Well, what does it say when we close our eyes and shut our ears to bigotry and injustice? What does it say about us? What does it say about you, about your value system? We must take responsibility for the complete, holistic development of all of our students and communities, ensuring our curriculum has the power to bring about change, personal change, institutional change, systemic change. When I'm asked what changes can be made in higher ed to advance social justice and the work of anti-racism, I often start with three questions. What authors are you citing? Which books are you assigning your students to read? Are you bringing your receipts to your meetings? Scientists, anthropologists, and archaeologists have proven that Africa is the birthplace of our humanity, but is that where we begin in our history classes? Imagine if students learned in world history class that Africa was the cradle of the most advanced civilizations. Take, for example, the kingdoms of Benin, Egypt, Ethiopia, the Congo, Mali, and their significant contributions to world civilization. If students were taught about Egypt and Ethiopia in the same way and at the same depth that they are taught about ancient Greece and Rome, we might better appreciate the beauty and magnificence of civilizations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The continent of Africa serves as a foundation and as an extension of our common humanity. It is where human civilization began, so we should be learning about it. Many of our human rights leaders believe education is the most powerful tool to combat systemic racism. My mother spent the last 20 years of her life working in higher ed in New York City. She understood the value of education and its ability to change lives of the better. I'm coming to an end. She was in the system because she knew that to overcome injustice, we have to combat it at every level, in business, the arts, politics, education, everywhere. As a child, Sheikh Tawfiq would come to our home every Wednesday and teach us about the significant contributions that women, Africa, and Islam made to the world. We learned about the oneness of God and the oneness of humanity. We learned to truly love ourselves, and trust me, all 6 of us really did. We never relied on others to determine our self-worth. Today, it allows me to see you as a reflection of me and me as a reflection of you, to love you just as I love myself. My parents knew if I learned to love me, I can love you, or to use your theme, to use your theme for MLK week, I can have the strength to love. You see, if I don't love me, I can't love you, and I will be of no help to you ever. And we have to learn how to love ourselves in order to learn how to love and have compassion for others. When we don't learn this lesson, we get caught in a cycle of division and self-destruction. And this is likely why self-love and activism were paramount in the Shabazz household. My parents' lessons about education and activism are more relevant than ever. My hope is that these most challenging and pressing years will produce present and future generations of problem solvers who focus on a holistic approach to human rights. Central to this discourse is the strength of community-led institutions that reflect our collective visions for what freedom really looks like and what accountability, democracy, and self-determination really are. Now more than ever is the time to commit to the work of radical institution building. Young people, this is our moment right now as students, educators and administrators, it is our responsibility to organize community networks. It is our responsibility to stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves. It is our responsibility to find our voices and make our voices heard together by any means. My father said it would be this generation, yours, who would recognize those in power have misused it and demand change, however, willing to do the hard and necessary work themselves. As the activist Fannie Lou Hamer said, we are in this bag together, educated and uneducated, rich and poor, women and men, Catholic and Protestant, Jewish and Muslim. We are in this bag together. Let's create a world that causes our communities to resonate with the words of the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. The fact that you are here today is evidence that you are committed to being and becoming agents of change. Simply by having these types of conversations at Misericordia, conversations we can no longer take for granted. You are making a difference in the world, and I salute you. When we bear witness, choosing community over chaos, we will be empowered by the truth that each and every one of us is a beautiful creation destined to shine our light for the greater good. Thank you. I love you, and God bless you.